Hello, demons and delinquents. My name is TB Skyen, and there is a KDA music video that we have not yet taken a look at on this channel, and it is the villain music video for Evelynn. Or I shouldn't call it a music video, apparently, because according to its title, it's a concept video. I would say that this is a distinction without difference, because it's a video that's set to music, and the purpose of it is to promote a single, so, you know, it's a music video. But the reason why they are drawing this particular distinction is a question of visual genre, because the more music video, and indeed the Popstars music video from KDA's debut, were much more in the vein of your traditional pop single music video. It's like, here's the Popstars, here they're like doing a complicated dance routine, but not so complicated that you can't post your own version of it to the internet for, you know, internet points and also to promote our album and stuff. Here is like the Popstars doing cool stuff. Ari is sitting on a washing machine, or maybe she's sitting on a throne, and the Kali is rapping on a train, or else she's driving a motorcycle. Like coherent visual narratives that are like really easy to decode and decipher in terms of what they're saying about the character, what they're doing in terms of world building, the visual universe of the characters themselves. This, however, I would classify much more closely, like in terms of visual genre. What I think about when I see this music video is a perfume advertisement, because perfume is sort of a difficult product to sell in a visual medium because it's smell. You can't just have a person show up on screen and say, "Hi, this perfume smells really good. You should wear it because you'll smell really..." Like, how do you communicate smell visually? And so what perfume advertisements tend to do is adopt a kind of sort of impressionistic, sort of dreamlike logic, where it's all attractive people like lounging around in rooms, and there's like some sort of soft voiceover. "Ah ouais, the allure of power, more money by Chanel," or whatever, while like they stand on top of roofs, or there's wind blowing through curtains, or it's a party or something, like some weird abstract emotional imagery that's supposed to communicate to you less like the actual physical properties of the perfume itself, and more a feeling, an aspirational lifestyle goal, which you can achieve if only you make sure that you smell of these particular chemicals. That's how that kind of advertising works. And this is filmmaking sort of in the same vein as that. And I should also stress, like, it's not like perfumes invented that kind of imagery, it's film language that exists very much already. But here, rather than being in the world of coherent narrative or concrete visuals, we are in a world of dream logic, a world of like disconnected imagery that's much more about communicating a feeling than communicating a story. Hence the rapid cutting, hence the weird lighting effects, hence the strange shifting from like nothing to a car, and then the car has like a hood, which you see the texture on like the bodywork, and then that texture turns into snakeskin, but then that snakeskin turns into velvet, and then that velvet something snakes in an eyeball, and then you fall into the eyeball. Like, it's all very evocative imagery, but not in the service of telling anything like a straight linear story. So, let's go through it from the beginning, shall we? And we open on this blue and strangely desolate cityscape. Just buildings, antennas. It looks kind of 1980s-ish, at least to my mind, with all these satellite dishes scattered around. No one's there, there's no people, there's no personality, there's no life, there's no plants, there's no anything. It's just long, straight, rigid lines. And then eventually, we cut to Evelynn on a rooftop, silhouetted in the dark against the sky. And this is how we're going to see Evelynn mostly, is either in shadow or partly in shadow, but never fully lit, never really any kind of concrete visual shot of what exactly she looks like or what her expression is like. There's always a sense that we don't get to see all of her. We don't get to see the whole of who or what she is. We only get to see glimpses and snapshots outlined in bright lines of light around the edges of her contours, but not really the person herself. The best look we really get at Evelynn is right here near the end, as she steps out of the shadows finally, but even still, she's mostly covered in dark, and all we really get to see of her is that mouth and like the lit up upper part of her chest, and then these brilliantly rendered lips. We'll get to those near the end. Now, I should warn that over the course of discussing this music video, we're going to have to talk a little bit about erotica. Not pornography, it's a different thing, but this is an extremely sensually charged music video, and Evelynn is the most explicitly sexual League of Legends champion, and also the most explicitly sexualized member, well, not sexualized, but most explicitly sex-oriented, sex-themed member of KDA themselves. And a lot of the visual imagery in this thing is oriented towards sensuousness and sensual feeling, and so the discussion of sexuality is relevant. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to see this entire music video as erotica, and we'll discuss that more as we move through it, but rather that it seems to me at least an extremely obvious and interesting theme to explore, because how League of Legends deals with sexuality is kind of a fascinating topic all on its own, in that League of Legends itself mostly doesn't. Like, yeah, there's like some vaguely sort of, oh, sexy ladies with cleavage and stuff in there, but in terms of actually being a game that deals with sex and sexuality, League of Legends generally doesn't. So it's interesting to see so much erotic imagery being used in this music video, which is meant to be like one of the more mainstream appeals that League of Legends makes to an audience that's not interested in playing the video game itself. Anyway, back to the actual music video. We were supposed to be discussing this thing from start to finish rather than going off on tangents. So we get a shift in color, first of all. Here, everything is like outlined in blue. The cityscape is just nothing but blues all over the place. Every day we got the blues here. And that then shifts, and there's a little bit of a hint towards the shift, because Evelynn is outlined here on the rooftop, and then a yellow light goes off. Just a somewhat warmer color than the surroundings, and she reacts to that. And if you wanted to interpret the imagery, it's almost as though she's been out in the city hunting for something, like perhaps the next victim, and there's the light that beckons her and causes her to go and investigate, looking through some narrow slit into some space that's clearly not meant for her, but to which she has some level of access. Again, the visuals of this music video aren't telling a coherent story, they're just giving you these little snippets of feelings and ideas, and so here the color shifts. You can still see the blue, the colder light of the cityscape exists on the left side, where Evelynn comes from, but then we have this little slit of just brilliantly orangey red light outlining her face very softly. And then we shift to this surreal imagery, where we have this little tour de force in ray tracing. Basically, you have this extremely simple architecture, just square walls and then some struts reaching across here, casting these long slitted shadows, and then they're moving the light source rapidly, which creates this sense of distorted space as the light moves. And they're accentuating that, I think, by also, like, literally moving the 3D objects around, like literally moving the walls around, which you can see in one of the next shots we get of this particular scene. But the point of this light moving so rapidly across this really stark and strange space is it induces sort of a sense of unease, a sense of space being warped around you, a sense of like the very room that you occupy not really being reliable. And there's a lot of these spatial distortions happening all throughout this music video. Our next image is one of liquid. Not necessarily water, it seems a little bit too thick to be necessarily water, but water and liquids in general, stuff that drips, stuff that flows, things that are suffused with it, are also, like, when it comes to erotic imagery, this is like the oldest code in the book. It's code for certain kinds of arousal, often female arousal. And that's sort of we first get these really stark, like, just straight lines all over the place with the cityscape where everything is a straight line. There's practically no curves except on the satellite dishes. And then we get this, again, these harsh, straight, rigid lines, but now they're being manipulated by something, meaning that they change their contours, they change their relationships. And then we get water, which is like the polar opposite of what we just got, like this liquid, which is all flow and lines and softness. And now it's being contrasted again with the harshness of this sort of industrial-looking space wherein we find this pool of water, or liquid, and Evelynn standing, again, silhouetted, inaccessible to us in a sense, against the bright background. As though she's emerging from this water, And then again, back to the spatial distortions in the harsh space, using the light to disorient us, to mess with our sense of where even gravity is at this point. And then back to Evelynn, still standing in that pool of liquid, I think. And here we get our first real look at what her character animation is like in this particular music video. And the way that she moves is languid, slow, smooth, deliberate. Like, there's no snappy movements. There's no sudden whipping of the hand over in one direction. She's always moving slowly. She's always moving deliberately. And this, I think, is, like, in terms of visual communication, it's meant to communicate an assuredness and a confidence. Like, Evelynn at no point in any of the shots that she's in this music video is ever in any kind of a hurry. She is fully confident that wherever she's going, she'll get there when she needs to. Like a wizard that never shows up late, as it were. And the first shot we get of her is her just running her long, sharp fingers through her own hair, seemingly just to enjoy the sensation of it. And then we get the real spatial distortion, and this is a fantastic shot, because when you just see it in full motion, you could be forgiven for thinking, oh, it's just that the light source is moving, and that's what makes everything seem so weird. It's because they're rapidly moving the light around. But you'd be wrong, because they're not only moving the light around, they're moving the entirety of the space. You can see how the ceiling essentially moves relative to the walls themselves. You can see how this wall is actually closing in a little bit, like these walls are coming towards you, and the light itself is moving as well, creating this just chaotic feeling, which is weird, right? Because everything here is solid, straight, unmoving lines. There's no bulging of the walls like you'd see in a horror film. There's no, like, scary distortions of space where, like, things that should be hard become soft. It's just this very solid, sparse, brutalist space that is clearly having its geometry manipulated in some deeply unnatural way. And it's not frightening as such, but it's certainly not comforting either. It's a sense of space itself being warped and manipulated around you. And then we cut back to Evelynn, silhouetted once again with the little edge lights giving us the contours of the outline of her, and the little eyelash poking out, which I think is just a lovely silhouette detail on the character. And again, Evelynn is in absolutely no hurry to get anywhere. Like, the only movement she really makes is just like she slightly turns towards the camera and brings her hand down, presumably from running through her hair from the previous shot that we saw her in, and curls those long fingers up into her palm. And then again, spatial distortions. And now we've graduated from just like moving the walls around to doing straight up kaleidoscope nonsense, because here we see like probably that pool of liquid that she was standing in previously. But here you can see how it's emerging as though we're looking at it in some kind of like mirror that's being unfolded in front of us. And as it's being unfolded, this couch comes into view. And this idea of like the sumptuous, luscious furniture is going to come back a lot. Because look how these chairs and how this furniture contrasts with the environment. The chairs have practically no straight lines in them. It's all curvature. It's all soft, sumptuous leather, and the curvature of those snake ornaments on the sides of them. They are soft and comfortable and pleasant, where the environment is completely stark and sparse. And there's this, again, this feeling of unease because this furniture doesn't fit in this environment. Like this, something about it just doesn't fit. It doesn't feel right. There's an uncanny quality to it. And then again, a close-up on Evelynn's hands. We're going to get a lot of these over the course of the music video, and here's where we really can see, like, the artists are playing with the lighting. And speaking of playing with the lighting, actually, there's something I should point out, which is the film grain. I'm going to zoom in, maybe not quite that much, but we're going to zoom in a bunch on the image. And if you pay attention, maybe, yeah, that much, you can see grain all over the image. Now, some of this is image compression from YouTube and just from compression in general, but you can also see, if you pay attention, that these compression artifacts change from frame to frame completely. They move in absolutely random patterns, and what this is an emulation of film grain. Now, film grain appears in, well, it appears in film, as you could probably work out, and the reason it appears in film is that film is a physical medium. That is to say, you have like physical film, which is coated in, I think it's like a silver iodide or something along those lines, which is then exposed to light, and it retains some properties of the light particles, the photons that hit them, and then as you shine light through the film and back onto a canvas, you can play the film back. But what that introduces is the artifact called film grain, which are the physical particles that exist in the liquid solution that is on the film, which creates this slight grainy effect that is always going to be there when you're shooting on a physical medium. But film grain doesn't exist in digital filmmaking. It doesn't exist in 3D animation. Like, there's no physical medium to introduce the artifact. So what they've done here is they've introduced that artifact artificially. They have added a layer of film grain on top of everything else that's going on, and as far as I can tell, the purpose of doing this is to create a greater sense of reality, because we are trained, well, not trained, but from having watched films and movies, we recognize the look of film grain. We recognize what it does to light and how it represents light. And if you take a look, especially, let's try and zoom in on that actually. Especially at something like the edge lighting around the nail on Evelynn's long finger here, you can see these bands of blue running along right here, up along the edge of the finger, and then this band of red out on the other side, chromatic aberration. And the way the film grain interacts with that has a particular look that even if you're not like a film buff or anything, instinctively you can recognize as, oh, this was filmed on a physical medium. You identify it visually more closely with older movies that were filmed on, film. At least I do. And that adds a sense of reality to the proceedings, which is aided, this is the thing that brought me onto it, which is aided by the way that they use light, because they have an exceptionally, well, realistic looking, but like also just like very grounded way of approaching light here. In 3D animation, you can do pretty much whatever the hell you want with light, because you can control every light source perfectly. And if you want a certain color light, if you want a certain direction of light, if you want everything to be lit equally at all times, you can do so, something that would be practically impossible in a physical space. But the light they've chosen is one that feels very realistic, even though I assume there's lots of subtle manipulations happening behind the scenes. And perhaps the final shot is one of the best examples of this. Look at this particular kind of lighting. Look how it interacts with Evelynn's skin. You can see little dimples in her skin, little imperfections, which I thought was an interesting choice. The way that it shines off the sparkle in her lipstick, the way that you have this soft banding over like the curvature and the texture of her skin itself, that gives this sense of realism. Oddly enough, in a music video that is not the least bit realistic at all, the lighting in this music video and the way that they approach texture is infinitely more realistic than it was in More or in Pop Stars, or indeed in pretty much any other video, like 3D animation video that League of Legends has ever produced. They go for an extreme realism in lighting, which creates this sense of odd, again, these uncanny contrasts with this highly unrealistic and surreal visual imagery contrasted with the extreme realism of their lighting simulations, which I find very interesting. It's this thing of creating an image that kind of doesn't make sense on the face of it. 3D animation, but lit as though it is physical reality, with film grain as though it was filmed on physical film. Anyway, once again, notice the movements that are being used here with Evelynn's fingers. Like, you see that sort of, that waving pattern that she's got going on, that soft, deliberate movement that she's using. Again, it's all about creating a visual sensation. Like, it's about creating in your mind as the viewer an idea of, oh, if I felt like what would that feel like to be there, to feel that kind of touch, or to just see that kind of movement happen in front of my actual eyes. What kind of feeling would that create in me? And that makes this music video kind of difficult for me to talk about, because usually I talk about like character animation and expression and all this stuff, but here this is much more a realm of subjective interpretation than usual. Like, everything is a matter of subjective interpretation, but this is so much more subjective than it usually is. And this is also where we get to the most explicit parts, at least I think, of the eroticism. Well, there's a shot later on that we'll talk about also, of the eroticism of these imagery, because look at that. Look at that. Like, especially that. Like, my word. My word. She's embracing, like, so this is one of her giant fingernails that come out of the ground in one of the sort of Neon Genesis Evangelion-ish images that's being used here, but the way that she's like softly caressing with like, these long, sharp metal claws, this smooth surface, and the way that there's this focus on her hands like snakes, sort of gently just caressing their way up this smooth surface. It's all about visual sensation. It's all about, I mean, depending on how receptive you are to it, of course, making, like, giving you that little sense of tingling down the back of your neck if you think to yourself, like, what would it feel like to receive that touch? What would it feel like to have those 5 sharp points running ever so gently across your smooth skin? Or circling ever so gently around your jewel. Make of that word what you will. There is a tremendous sensuality to the way that Evelynn's hands are animated here. And here, especially, it's animated like a snake curving its way around something. And snake imagery is going to come back in a big way all across this music video. But this is where, like, the most, like, obvious, like, and again, this doesn't have to be sexual. Like, eroticism and sensuality are closely connected with sex, yes, but that's not the only thing that they're connected with. That's not the only thing that they can be about. It can also just be about, like, the storytelling of sensation. Because when you see someone's hand framed like this, running over a surface like this, what does that tell you about the relationship between the owner of the hand and the surface itself? This is not a submissive gesture, right? Like, this is a gesture essentially of ownership, of this thing belongs to me, and I am playing with it for my own purposes, for my own fun. This is Evelynn also enjoying the sensation of what she's doing. And here's where I suppose we should talk about viewer positions, as it were, because as a viewer of this music video, and as a listener to the song, there's essentially 2 readily available positions for you to occupy. You can identify yourself with Evelynn herself, being this boss-ass bitch, this villain with whomst one does not dare to fuck, this terrifying entity who can tear apart others and do it without a shred of feeling in her soul. Or you can identify yourself with her victim, the person being utterly dominated, torn apart, used, and discarded without a second thought. And that's where we get into the domination and submissive themes that are very much part of, like, again, Evelynn is the most explicitly sexual League of Legends champion overall. She is specifically a sadist who gets off, as it were. Well, she's a demon who feeds on human beings' pain, but one of the ways that she inflicts pain is by first enticing them with pleasure. So, pain, pleasure. Well, yeah, you see where this is going, and that kind of imagery is being carried over here again, because those claws are sharp. Those claws are dangerous. Those claws could hurt you terribly if the owner of them should decide to do so. And if you identify yourself with the victim of Evelynn's attentions in this instance, the thrill here is that particular sense of danger, that surrender to a domineering and powerful other who is under no obligations to care about your needs or your feelings, or at least that's the fantasy. Not necessarily, in reality that's abuse, but that's the fantasy that's being indulged in here. And of course, if you take the position of Evelynn, part of the fantasy that's being sold here, referring back again to the perfume commercials we discussed earlier, the visual aesthetic, the sensation, the feeling that you are being communicated here is, again, that thing of the song, being that boss-ass bitch, dominating, controlling, owning whatever you touch. with, nary a word of protest from the objects of your interest or desire. This, in fact, comes across in the lyrics as well. It's the second verse. Is it really a surprise if I'm playing with your mind, and I treat you like a prize, then I throw you to the side? And am I really that bad if I love to make you mad, and get happy when you're sad, only care about a bag? In control. That's how I like it, and I'm never letting go. Like, yeah, it doesn't have to be sexual, but oh boy, it sure is trying hard to make you think along those particular lines. And like that movement right there, like, I mean, come on, that little circling around the protruding nubbin things, like, boy howdy, you know exactly what you're doing, you bastards. Anyway, let's talk about something completely different. Let's talk about the texture on Evelynn's hands, because, once again, man, I am interested in the way that they've decided to render her physical body, her skin especially. Maybe zoomed in a little bit too much here. Let's zoom it out a little bit. But the thing I'm interested in here is that, specifically, you can see this as the light moves across her skin. They're rendering little wrinkles, little bumps and dimples, like the stuff that actually exists on, most human beings' actual physical bodies, including the most physically perfect specimens that the species has to offer, the pop stars who are endlessly airbrushed. They too have these little flaws, these little wrinkles, these little imperfections and bumps and protrusions in their skin, and it fascinates me that apparently they've chosen to very deliberately give Evelynn those as well. It gives her more of a sense of age, where in the More music video, because they were essentially like plastic dolls, like they were very much like game characters in terms of the rendering here. Here we have a rendering that makes Evelynn a much more physical presence, like a much more like flesh and blood presence when we get to see her skin. That is, like when we get to see her out of silhouette, when we actually get to get a look at what she is like, there's much more of a sense of physical presence to her than there is in the More music video, where she's kind of made of plastic a little bit, which is not a bad thing, necessarily, but it's a different aesthetic approach to the character. And, like, if you weren't thinking along erotic lines already when you saw, like, her hands doing this stuff, you will be here when we have this long, straight, hard object that's being very gently caressed by a pair of hands circling around. Like, it's not subtle. It's not subtle at all, and it doesn't want to be. It doesn't care if you think it's subtle. This is self-indulgence, because it's not necessarily a phallic well, it is a phallic object, but it doesn't have to be. It's not about pleasuring the object, it's about taking pleasure in the touch from the perspective of Evelynn, which is why her hands are snaking around it. That serpent imagery is going to be a major feature here. A serpent coiling around, constricting, overpowering, overwhelming. That's also the imagery that she plays with her, what are they called? Streamers, lashers, that's what they're called. As she brings them up here, they too are moving like snakes and serpents. And here we get a broader shot where we get to see the Neon Genesis Evangelion weirdness that's going on, which is that she's walking through this weird, like, dirt field that's populated with oversized representations of her own sharp, shiny fingernails, which are the things that she's been caressing. So what she's been caressing, like the metallic things that she's been caressing with her fingers up until now, have really been her own hands. So there is, in that sense, perhaps an act of self-worship going on here as well, which I think is interesting. And then we swap again to a blurred, like an intentionally blurry silhouette of Evelynn, just vibing, essentially dancing, and again, these smooth, gentle, curving, and self-indulgent motions. And we see that here as well when she's about to, like, scrape her nail against the wall. It's a slow, deliberate movement. There's no haste here. It's just her enjoying the feeling of being exactly who she is in these strange and unusual environments. And look what the camera is doing here. Like, most of the camera angles we get are fairly static, right? Like the camera isn't doing very much. it's maybe tracking some things, but then we get these wide shots, like when we actually get to see a sort of a full-body version of Evelynn. We get these wide shots, but the camera is like doing Michael Bay shit all of a sudden. The camera is all of a sudden rotating and twisting around. We only get steady shots of Evelynn when we don't get to see her. The moment we have a chance to actually take in some of her details, the camera is preventing us from doing so. Like here, finally we get her, like, more or less lit. Like, a full body shot of her properly lit-ish. But now we're, like, all of a sudden really, really far away. She's sort of in the middle ground of the image, too far back for us to actually see her. And the camera is swooping around, not giving us any time to stop and think. Or stop and take her in. And the same thing kind of happens here, as, like, we had the very close-up on her dance routine here before, where the camera was static. Now that we've zoomed out a little bit, all of a sudden the camera is again trying to prevent us from getting a handle on exactly what she's doing. And then we cut again, seemingly randomly back to this little wall-touching thing that she's doing. And there you see, like, again, it's about power. Like, so much of the imagery in this music video is about power. It's about control over an environment, over oneself, and it's about ownership. What you can see here is, like, this is just a frickin' wall, but Evelynn, like, the way that she's moving, the deliberateness with which she's doing what she's doing, and the effect, which is the moment she touches it, sparks quite literally fly, that gives it this sensual nature. Even though, like, it's a person touching a brick, a concrete wall, there should literally be the least sexy thing in the universe, but because of the aesthetics of the movement and the visual effect, like the literal sparks flying, it gets a sensual quality from that. And I do really like when she touches the wall, but the rest of her hand is still moving. You can see that little, like, you can see the joint moving backwards, and the hand kind of, you can see how the rest of the fingers curl upwards in order to meet the resistance, because it's pulling on the, what are they called? Sena. Know the word in Danish, but I'm looking for it in English. Tendons! The tendons in her hand are being pulled on by the pushback, so again, like, the rest of her body follows, which again is this strange physical realism in her body and her movement. Like, you can even see it here. If you take a close look at her hands, you can see the lines on the palms of her hands. These are not, like, picture-perfect cartoon hands. These are a woman's actual hands. Like, that's what it looks like. And again, the deliberateness of the motion. Like, just gently tapping her way across this surface. Which, like, the surface could be you, or the person doing the tapping could be you. And I do like the little smoke effect here. Like, as she's scraping across, you can see, like, just from the tips of her nails, emerges this smoke or dust effect, as though she's, like, literally setting the thing on fire just by touching it. Which, again, having your skin set on fire by touch is a sensation that is deeply associated with eroticism. And then we get this dancing sequence of her, like, again, Evelynn doesn't really seem to care about the camera here, does she? Like, there's no, unlike, again, like, with the More music video, when the girls are doing a dance routine, they're clearly doing a dance routine for the camera, like, they're performing, they're putting on a performance for others. Everything Evelynn does in this music video, she's doing entirely for herself. Like, you don't factor into the equation of anything that she's doing as the viewer. She doesn't give a damn. Like, her only interest in you is to mess with you. Anyway, let's have some smoke effects now, why not? A smoke effect in the shape of a heart. So, smoke effects like this one, I believe, are physics simulations that are, like, pretty well simulated nowadays. Like, I think they've been sort of, I mean, not necessarily figured out, because you can always do it better, but they're tech that's been around since, like, the mid-2000s, I think, to, like, really generate these sort of hyper-realistic looking smoke clouds that bulge and billow in very realistic ways around. But it's also, again, it's about visual sensation, because they look like cotton candy, don't they? They look soft, they look enveloping, they look intoxicating in their way. And here again, furniture, for some reason, the smoke recedes to reveal this sumptuous, round, curvy, soft, gentle sofa for some reason, which exists now again inside this harsh industrial space, along with a whole bunch of other curvy sort of Versailles, Louis XIV, Sun King, elaborate, classical, perhaps Victorian, in a sense, furniture, which is visual signifiers of opulence. Like, this is the kind of furniture that you associate with old castles and mansions and European old money from way back in the day, nobility, which is complete opposite again of the environment that this furniture seems to be stored in. And there's also a color contrast. Notice that the furniture itself, the sofa, is all purple and pink. Like, that's the entire color scheme of the sofa. But the environment, we've got some yellows, we've got some blues, but nothing warm, nothing even remotely close to the red end of the spectrum like the sofa itself. So there's this visual contrast again going on. And the camera effects, of course, aren't making it any better as you see the entire space again being distorted. Like, you can literally see the window over here contracting against itself, the entire hallway coming closer, which is they're simulating a lens effect that it's used in a very famous shot in the movie Jaws, where the guy is realizing that there's a shark in the water, and then, like, you have this camera effect to kind of communicate his panic at that realization, being used here again to mess with our sense of space and perception. Look at those lights in the background over here, and seemingly, I guess, in the mirror, or perhaps partway down the hallway, they get blinked out all of a sudden as the camera perspective shifts, and then we get this weird image of this furniture clustering together and crushing against itself as though it's being pulled by some inevitable sort of gravity, and then falling as though the entire building is being twisted enough that gravity is now pulling it down this way. Again, this sense of space being upended. Gravity is one of those things that are like a constant in human experience. Like, ball go up, ball go down, because gravity works. But if gravity starts going sideways all of a sudden, if the entire angle of the room goes tilted, you lose that sense of stability. This is an image with no stability whatsoever. Like, the camera is stable, it's moving very slowly, very deliberately, but everything else is complete visual chaos. There's no solid ground to stand on, which is also where we get this lamp shattering against the floor, but then magically repairing itself by seemingly running in reverse. And again, notice the hyper-realism of the lighting that they're choosing to use here that makes this thing look less like a 3D object, which it almost assuredly is, and more like an actual real physical object that's being filmed in the physical world. And they're doing so many lens effect emulations. Like, again, with a camera lens, something has to be in focus, and then things that aren't in focus are blurry. That's how camera lenses work. That's indeed also how the human eye works. But in 3D animation, you can have everything be in focus all of the time if you want to, because you're not constrained by the physical limitations of a lens. But here, focus on the shattering chandelier, but everything else is kind of blurry. And again, the camera effect where it seems like the entire space is distorting around the action that's happening. And again, this imagery here, this to me feels like it's about power. Like, this is a beautiful, crafted, expensive-looking object just shattering on the floor and then coming back together. That, like, something about that feels like it's about power, because it's about wealth. This thing is expensive looking, and it's about the temerity to waste that wealth, which is also the thing that's happening with the furniture. All this furniture looks incredibly expensive, and then it is simply discarded, shattered, thrown around like so much trash and garbage without any value, because again, as the lyrics keep telling us, I'm a straight up villain, no feeling, no soul, I don't care. I can shatter precious, priceless physical objects, I can destroy everything, I can discard everything, and it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't change anything for me, because I'm a straight up villain. And now back to this gravel space for some reason, which again, I won't try to interpret why there is this, like, we have these stark industrial spaces, and then we have this sparse, bare gravel. There's no plants anywhere in this music video, by the way. No plants at all. No biological life, in fact, other than Evelynn and, well, the serpents that are going to be coming up a little bit later. And then we get this piece of animation. Now, here's some animation to dig our teeth into. Because, look at those lips, man. Look at that lip animation. Lips are hard to animate. Like, they are kind of a difficult structure because they're all spongy and soft, but they're also full of muscles, and lips can be articulated in millions of just incredibly intricate ways, and getting that stuff to work on a character in 3D animation is a lot of work at the best of times. Like, we have all played video games where they didn't quite get that kind of thing right, Mass Effect Andromeda, where the slightest little bit of mistake, the slightest little bit of the work not working, makes the whole thing look uncanny. So look at how the lips on Evelynn look animated here. Like, look how, as she says, like, look how you can kind of tell which vowels and which words she's pronouncing here. As she does this, look how the upper lip pushes forward, being pushed out the same way that you do when you say ooh, right? Or whoa. Like, we push our lips out to create that circular shape in order to make those vowels, and you can see that happening here. You can see the little quiver in the bottom of her lip as, like, the vibrations of what she's saying moves her around. You can see the lips sticking together ever so slightly because of the lipstick, and contorting and changing their shape all across the way. And some of this might be physics engine like, there's probably stuff you can do with physics engines and character models where you can have the computer generate some of the radiant movement of the primary things you're doing, but this is just really intricate animation work, because again, they're playing with light. Like, we have the light playing off of Evelynn's lips here, in very specific ways that are being used to accentuate the animation. Like, look at the difference between these two frames. Look up, I'm gonna zoom in on this because this fascinates me to no end. 500% is perhaps too much. 300 should do. There. You can see how the folds in her lips unfurl, like uncrumple from themselves as the mouth moves around, and just like the sheer amount of expertise it takes to do this and to make it look good when you're zoomed in that close on something. You don't have a lot of room to get the details wrong. The details have to be gotten right, or else, like, we see it immediately right away. And I think the film grain and the lighting effects are probably doing some work to sort of help, like, define the volume of the thing that's moving in a really compelling way. But, like, man, that's impressive. And we're gonna look closer at some of the other lip animation that she has, because this is, oh boy, great lip animation in this thing. Anyway, now muscle car. And the muscle car is interesting to me because it's very explicitly, like, you have the engine poking out of the hood and the cylinders and, like, or rather the air intake and all that. The muscle car traditionally is an extremely masculine symbol of power. Like, it's the kind of thing that's associated with dude bros and people doing drag races and stuff like that. It's very typically associated with masculinity, but the shape that this car takes, Diva is the very first thing we see, and then it's bright purple. Even, like, the vents are purple, and the whole thing has this, like, it's a muscle car, make no mistake about it, but it's also, like, sumptuously clean with these long, slender, curvy lines. It has a slight, not a lot, but a slight air of femininity about it, especially in the way that the colors are put together. And so, again, this is imagery of power. Straight up villain, no feeling. I am the badass with whomst you do not fuck. It's a symbol of power being used by Evelynn with supreme confidence to accentuate her own power and dominance. Not by appropriating masculinity, but by appropriating something which is a symbol of masculinity and making it her own, making it essentially feminine. And here we get one of the more interesting visual transitions as well, because we get this shot over the hood of the car where the smooth metal of the car's hood transforms into this snakeskin texture. And that snakeskin texture itself begins to ripple and bulge and fold in over itself in these like water, like waves crashing on the shore. Like, it has this tremendously sensual feeling to it. And then that snakeskin transitions into just pure liquid velvet and back again. And again, it's all about that visual feeling of something like gently rippling across a smooth surface. And then it transitions into like just straight up fabric moving, becoming smooth. And then now we finally get the actual snakes. We get Evelynn's eyes, and as we zoom in on it, this is like highly disturbing imagery, frankly. We see that inside of her pupils, inside that golden light, as it's being snuffed out, it's all just the writhing bodies of serpents. And again, this is imagery that's meant to communicate a feeling, and not just an emotional feeling, but a physical sensation as well. This is envelopment, something sliding across every pore of your skin every moment, writhing, coiling around, constricting, releasing. This is like, as erotically charged imagery goes, this is like way up there with tentacles, if you take my meaning. And again here, Evelynn's own hands with these serpents just coiling their way across and then coiling away. And this fantastic stuff happening with the lips here, coiling their way across her face. This is all about physical sensation. This is all about gentle touch, like the feeling of something sliding across your skin. Something which is dangerous, but also seductive in its way. And, okay. This freaking lip thing they do here. Look at this. You see that? You see how, like, as she's slowly opening her lips up to smile, how the lips stick together a little bit, and like you can see how like this part of the upper lip is coming away first, and then that part, the skin, is giving a little bit, and then it kind of snaps back as it releases, the same way the actual skin does in real life on your lips. When you put your lips together for a long time and you pull them back apart, they'll stick to each other a little bit, and they did that here, and it looks fucking amazing. Like, man, that is so cool. And it looks weird when you zoom in on it like this, but I don't know. Am I the only one who gets excited about this? It's just, oh, that's a very cool thing to do, to have that little tension and release thing going on. And again, just writhing bodies of snakes, things intertwining and becoming indistinguishable from one another. The physical sensation of completely losing yourself, losing track of where you begin and something else ends. And again, more expensive stuff, just signifiers of wealth, which again are signifiers of power. But also, they are snake-formed and snake-shaped, because snake imagery, very much a part of this music video. More Evelynn dancing as the camera, again, no sense of coherent gravity here. Things are just coiling around, swirling, becoming intertwined. And this is like the first time Evelynn looks directly at the camera. There. And then she looks away again. Because again, none of this performance is for you. And here comes some of the more interesting imagery. Some of the more fun stuff they're doing. Because Evelynn's clearly like, she's putting her hand up against a window of some sorts, or a screen or something. And then she pushes on it. And again, this is all about physical sensation. This is all about like something stretching, constricting over you, and you pushing against it, breaking free from it, becoming enveloped by it, or Evelynn becoming enveloped by it. Here she is holding fire. Fire, again, extremely a thing that's very highly connected with passion, with eroticism, and with power, and with danger, for that matter. Most things that are connected with danger, like snakes, for example, are also signifiers of power. Control over fire is power. Burning passion, you know, all that kind of thing. And again, she's looking directly at the camera now, but not because she's pandering to it. Like, this is not the gaze of someone who's concerned about what you think. This is the gaze of someone who is inspecting you for your usefulness, who is, like, making a decision about whether to let you live or not. This is an assessment And you are not necessarily, like, you might be found wanting here. Like, this doesn't look like she's especially pleased with you, does it? And we get this stuff right here. And there's some cool stuff going on with frame rates right here. You can see Evelynn's character model is moving plenty, but then 1, 2, 3, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. On every second or third frame, these roots and branches spread out, and it's somewhat of the like the imagery of like the snake imagery of things unfurling and enveloping, but also it's like wings, but not in any shape or form angel wings. These are demon wings, and that's also when the music and the lyrics start to go really kind of dark. This is, I think it's like the bridge. Listen to your brain go stupid, go dumb, go stupid, and then we go insane. Just do what I say. Follow me. I'll lead the way. Which again, oh god, the lip animation is so good though. Like, look at that. Oh my god. Okay, talk about that. Which again, if you're familiar with like the tropes of different kinds of dominance and submission play, that kind of thing of like let your brain go, like let your mind go, become stupid, like become pliant, do what I say, lose your sense of self. Yeah, that stuff is in there. It's popular in those circles. It's a thing that's very much associated with it. But my god, that lip animation though, and like the teeth as well, but mostly the lip animation, like just the softness and shapeliness that they've got, like that little like that when she does that plosive, that's you gather air and constrict your lips and then let it all out in one go. That's a plosive. That's your T's, or rather, that's your P's and B's are plosives, bilabial plosives, I think they're called. It's been a long time since I studied linguistics. But you can see how, again, the shape of the lips. Look how they contract as she goes in for that. Like, look how they contract around themselves and then expand with the consonant as it's being expressed. Like, man, that takes a lot of work to get right. Man, that takes a lot of work to get right. And then more sensual imagery. Here we have this flowing, it looks like you can't quite tell if it's a wave of liquid or fabric. It's going to turn out to be fabric, because here we have Evelynn, again, continuing that imagery from when she was pushing her hand through the screen, of, again, envelopment, and this, like, just the sensual idea of what does it feel like to be doing that? What does it feel like for her? She's enjoying that sensation. This veil that's over her, like, hiding her from us, but also making her available to us in a strange way. Like, the silhouette underneath there could be anything. Could be wearing everything, could be wearing nothing. Like, the uncertainty, again, is part of the excitement. And more, like, just, like, you can see the tip of the tongue behind the teeth. And the teeth themselves, again, not cartoon teeth. Like, you can see differences in shapes and little imperfections going on, like little gaps and stuff that you wouldn't necessarily get, I think, on like a perfect cartoon character, but which exist here because, again, she's such a physical presence when you finally do get to see her. And look at as she's delivering the vowel, look at the corners. Look how they rise and reveal the canines, like the sharp teeth, giving her this slightly vampiric smile. And again, like, just the articulation of this, man. There's so much going on. And then this abstract imagery, this circle of smoke, sort of blinking in and out of existence, becoming smaller, vanishing. And then we're back to just Evelynn moving confidently through a space, a dreamlike, unreal space with circling lights that seem to make no sense whatsoever, and her, again, always mostly hidden from us, never quite fully available, even though at that point she should be. Evelynn from below looking up at the cityscape lighting up for her, and her, again, tracing a gentle line with her finger down something smooth, and strong. Like, the imagery is all over the place, but it all tells this coherent story of power, control, domination, submission, of sensual enjoyment. And we get, like, at the end of the music video, we get this flash through all the imagery we've been looking at already, right? Comes back again, just to sort of reestablish that this is all within Evelynn's domain. This is all within her control. This is everything over which she has power. And then finally she steps forward, and we get our first proper, or the closest thing we get to a proper look at her. And it's this, like, and this is where the glasses are a clever little character design touch, because they have almost sort of an inhuman quality to them. Not rounded like human eyes, but insectoid, demonic. Something's like a little bit off. It gives her face an odd character that I really like. And then and just like the little pearls of light collecting on her lips. Yeah, the way the hard shadow falls from the upper lip down to the lower lip. It's like, damn, they put in the effort here, man. And again, imperfections, like things that you wouldn't see in the More music video at all. You can see smile lines along the edges of her smile. You can see dimples and imperfections in her skin, which is interesting, because, like, you would think in a music video that's so obsessed with bragging about her perfection and, like, her coldness and untouchability, that you would go for that plastic look, right? That you would go for that perfect smoothness that is unattainable by mortal man, or woman for that matter. But no. Pores, dimples, wrinkles, lines. Which, of course, is always going to be more erotically charged than the plastic pop star dolls that we get in More. Again, that's not a dig on More, that's just an observation of differences in aesthetic. Anyway, I think that's about all I had to say about this music video. There was really no way that I was going to make this coherent, I don't think, because the music video itself is not coherent in that sense. It's a sensory exploration. It's a journey through images and sensations. It's extremely subjective and deeply fascinating and kind of hypnotic to look at when you look at it in motion. And I quite enjoyed it. I hope that they have more concept music videos in the works, because I'd like to see what this kind of impressionistic, surreal approach to imagery would do for someone like Ari, or for Kaiser with Drum Go Dumb. On that one especially, it's going to be really interesting. I don't think they will. I think this imagery is more specifically reserved for Evelynn and her realm of the senses, but, well, one can always hope. Anyway, if you have enjoyed this deeply unstructured ramble about the strange, fascinating, and delighting imagery in Evelynn's music video, then you can hit the like, comment, and subscribe buttons down below to see more videos like it. Well, probably not a lot more videos like it, because stuff like this comes around pretty rarely, but videos that are sort of vaguely like this one, I suppose. And also, my Bloodborne playthrough, which, yeah, that's also here. My channel is weird, man. Right. I have a Patreon, a merchandise store, and a tip jar. If you want to, you can use them. If you don't want to, or if you're not in a position to be able to, genuinely, please don't worry about it. It's fine. I will encourage you to, when you are able, to try and support content that you enjoy online with direct contributions of however much you can, whenever you can, because a $1 donation directly to a YouTuber or a content creator, especially if they are small or niche and don't have a lot of, like, broad mainstream appeal, can quite literally be the same as thousands or tens of thousands of views on a video or on a web page that's supported by advertising. Those little donations and contributions make much more of a difference than you think. So, if you are able to, and if you are willing to, please consider doing it for that content online that you personally enjoy, because you make so much more of a difference than you think. Anyway, right, last bit of self-promotion. I have a second channel. I play video games over there. We're playing Hades, going through Diablo, the original from 1996. Some Legends of Runeterra happens over there every once in a while when I remember to record it. Maybe streaming sometimes. Also, like, when I'm editing videos for this channel, sometimes I stream it over there. So, you know, you can come and see that if you want to, and if you don't want to, don't worry about it. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to wash your hands and wear a mask, and try to act in solidarity with those people who are working really quite hard, working overtime right now, to try and make the world a better place.